everyone knows you, but I'm going to
Very
just a
popular.
quick introduction. He is here from the State Council of Developmental Disabilities, but we also have Laura Noland here and Jim Toohey. Both of them join us from the Bay School in Santa Cruz, which provides educational services to students with more severe forms of autism. And they're actively working to find ways to expand services to adults as well. So David, take it away. Well, we are set.
If you can advance the slides, that'd be great. Okay, check. All right, thank you all. Kathy, if I say anything out of line, you need to correct me. We're talking about work, employment, and we're talking about men and women with disabilities who need to work. And when you those two things together, we're talking about vocational rehabilitation. So I want to set a little context. In California, there are laws to encourage, specifically encourage, the service system to arrange employment supports for our clientele, for people with autism or any intellectual and developmental disability. That law is called Employment First. It's mostly a policy, but it's to align special education services, Department of Rehab Services, and Department of Developmental Services to work together to prepare our folks with disabilities for employment as adults. So, that translates into every IEP or every IPP meeting from transition age onward, there will be a discussion about work and a goal that will discuss how your child will prepare for work. So what does work mean? In California, we use the term competitive integrated employment. This is important to understand. We come from a period in our history where employment for people with developmental disabilities was sheltered, it was in warehouses and classrooms, and it was paid by the piece, and often was for less than minimum wage. So we want to abandon that model. That worked 50 years ago. It is now it doesn't demonstrate the rights and dignity of a person. So we want people to be competitively integrated into the community while working. So that means they're going to get paid a minimum wage, or they're going to be reimbursed for services and supports. They're going to be reimbursed for services or goods at the market rate, and they're going to it's going to be done in the community and not in a classroom or a warehouse away from a segregated setting. I got my breathing all off on these presentations, so I'm sorry myself with it. So that translates itself into four types, into further definitions about integrated work, which means it's in the community, competitive work, which means it's going to be at the market rate or above minimum wage, and it also includes a person starting their own business or being self-employed. Next slide. So that's kind of the context. All this always needs to be translated into how you as family members think about this and use language to identify it. So, when you think about employment for your child, regardless of their level of disability, what's wanted? Find that out. What is your child's career goals? After you know that goal, what level of support are they going to need? And then, what type of working situation will they be in? And then be sure to distinguish what is a career, that is what we do to get money, versus what we love to do, our aspirations, the things we might do that our careers enable us to do. Okay? So back to our context. Vocational rehabilitation is about getting people with disabilities work. And it's done through the provision of services that go through this series of service delivery. It's always been somewhat considered a linear process. Next slide. But for people with intellectual and developmental disability, what we want to do is modify or expand that vocational primer model and have it be specific to the folks that we work with, or to our children. So what I'm going to ask you to do is adopt the principle of supported employment. So those areas of vocational rehab that are offered to get people working, there's a translation needed for our community so that pre-vocational skills should be offered during transition in the transition programs in school. Assessments need to be translate that into discovery of a person's interest in career. Then there's on-the-job trainings and internships. There's this customized employment, which we'll talk a little bit about further. Then there's job coaching, where a job developer, well, first there's job development, that a job developer will find the job for the person. Then there's coaches, and then the coaches help maintain the job, and hopefully the person moves forward in their career. Go back. A couple of things. So everything in italics, those are where the system is not offering funding, appropriate levels of funding for support. Only the bold type is what regional centers offer for people with developmental disabilities when working in supported employment. So they're only providing half of what's needed in terms of supports for our folks. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. The other thing is that in the IDD world, it's not a linear process. It's more of a looped process. The person may enter the market at a different place, opt out of the market due to behavioral needs or other needs, and then rejoin the market. So it's a loop. It doesn't matter where they enter or where they exit. They can always re-enter the loop and find work. So it's a non-linear approach. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about assessment. So I mentioned the term discovery. This is a person-centered approach to finding out the career interest of your child. So you want to figure out their career goals, their preferred career, what they would love to do without any obstacles. What would the job match be? Again, would this be an interest, or would this be something that would yield an income? And then the type of work. Is it going to be a situation where they're going to be employees? That is, they're going to get a paycheck, which is our traditional system of working? Or are they going to be self-employed, where they're going to be creating an invoice, delivering a good or a service? All these are very important because I'll explain that next. So employability, it's a real simple formula. A person will work if they have the proper set of skills and support. So in this graph, I do pretty good as a regional manager for state council. So I have the skills. I would be here on the graph. My goal in life would be to be a neuroscientist. At this point, I will never be a neuroscientist unless I get a lot of support. Okay, so I would be up there. Any human being fits somewhere on this particular scale, including our children. For this session, it's about those who require more supports. Next slide. So here's our data. Currently, with the support system in place in the state of California and the supported employment options available to our folks, only 14% are working in supported employment jobs. That means the day programs and other providers are finding employment opportunities, but not under the community integrated employment definition. Or our folks are unemployed. Next slide. So this is how the scale in California looks. And it's kind of this way across the country. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Bay School, who, faced with these challenges, has put together an incredible set of vocational services that are things to take notes on and see if can be reapplied with your services.
Oh, I can do it. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Laura Noland from the Bay School, and Jim and I are going to be talking about a successful model, a model for successful employment. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the Bay School. We are a non-public school in Santa Cruz, and we serve individuals with between the ages of 5 to 22 with more complex needs. They have severe, profound autism. They have developmental disabilities. They've usually come to us with very limited or no formal communication. Lots of different types of challenging behaviors that they need more intensive behavior support. Anything from aggression to self-injurious behavior, elopement, and so on. What we provide is individualized one-to-one support. We use an ABA methodology. We see that with the right supports in place and the resources that we have within our school setting, that we're able to see a lot of students make great gains. And we are focusing on expanding language and communication and social skills and functional academics and daily living skills, all of those things, and building independence across all of those areas. We also focus on employment. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our, Jim and I are both going to tell you a little bit about our employment and community inclusion program. This is a part of our program that takes place during school hours, and it is where we support our students in both obtaining volunteer experiences and paid employment in the community. And we're not going to talk too much about volunteer work today. Know that there are laws and regulations around volunteer work and things like that. But for the purposes of the talk today, we're going to really more zoom in on the paid work experiences. So with this program, we provide one-to-one support to our students in community work settings. We have highly trained staff that help our students in these various settings. Right now, we're at 14 different sites. We're always adding sites, replacing sites. It's a kind of ever-evolving process. Our individuals have varied length of shifts. They might work a 30-minute shift or up to maybe a 3-hour shift a business during the school day. We have 19 participants currently. That's more than half of our students. And it's really become a very robust part of our program over the last several years. What I do want to emphasize is that we're not here to advocate that every individual have share the priority of accessing paid employment. That's not, we don't see that as the goal and a person-centered process, right? But we do want to offer some tips and suggestions, because we do know that with the individuals we serve, they have very complex needs. They have, some very challenging behaviors in their repertoire, and they are able to access paid employment and through this model. So just want to make that note and share with you. Jim's going to be speaking next. He's our coordinator of vocational services, and he oversees this whole process, right, from start to finish. He helps build relationships with businesses in our community. He helps assess students. He helps match them to the right placement. He helps provide the training and oversight of all of our staff. And so kind of, he's really integral in that process and in overseeing this program. And so he is going to share a little bit of some helpful tips with you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm really excited to be here to share with you some of the success stories we've had at the Bay School. Kind of put a face to everything that we're talking about, and hopefully pass on some really helpful, practical tips that we have developed at the Bay School over time. We kind of started with a customized employment. It sort of morphed from supported employment, but honestly, we recognize we're very lucky with the supports that we have in place. We kind of look at our model as a Bay School model. It's a very unique situation. What I really want to emphasize here is, from this definition, we're finding the skills and interest of the individual, right? But then we're seeking out the proper business to partner with, because we find that using those skills and interests in a way that provides value to the business is really the most important thing. When you can find a partnership where both parties are benefiting, those are our longest running placements. Those are the places that the person is able to be successful and grow as time goes on. So this is Zach. Zach works at Coast Paper and Supply. It's an office and cleaning supply warehouse in Santa Cruz. Zach is a big physical guy. He has a lot of energy. He can be a little bit loud sometimes. This is a perfect place for Zach. He uses a checklist that has 123 items on it. He goes in twice a week. He works 90 minutes for each shift. He does a complete inventory of their retail space. Then he goes back into the warehouse, stocks up the cart with all the supplies that they need, and then stocks the shelves. So he is providing a huge value to Coast Paper, which we'll talk about a little bit more in another slide. But he's also doing it in a way that lets him feel really comfortable. He's in a comfortable environment for himself. So Zach he started right after COVID, so he's been there for a little over a year. Molly works at Goodwill twice a week. She does an hour shift. Molly is a student who loves things to be in the right place. She loves order. She loves to know that everything is where it is supposed to be. I love this picture because it's her first day at Goodwill. This just happened this week, where she's organizing the book section. I really wish that we could gather again next Saturday and I could show you a picture of what that section will look like after she's had her hands on it for just 2 or 3 shifts, because everything will be perfect, everything will be sized, everything will be tucked all the way to the back. It's really a great place for Molly because she's making the world right in her eyes, and she's very happy with that. You also notice that she has an AAC device on her hip. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the future as well. She's in a very customer-facing position where she's out working on the retail floor. She's got the vest on, she's got her ID tag on, so customers approach her frequently with questions. So a little bit later we'll talk about that. Alan is our longest running employee. He is going to graduate in December, and he's been at Pacific Cookie Company for 5 years. Wow. He currently works two 2-hour shifts per week. Alan is a very, very precise individual. He is excellent, repetitive, doing over and over. He does a couple hundred bags per shift, and Pacific Cookie Company will actually give us feedback if those stickers are as small as 1/8 of an inch too high. I was really curious, and I measured it one time, like what's the level that they give us feedback on. Alan adjusts. He is amazing at that. And the great thing about this was when we started 5 years ago at Pacific Cookie Company, we were doing one type of job, and the other packaging employees went to the owners and said, if those Bay School students did this part of the job, our part of the job would go much faster. So that was feedback from coworkers to the owners of the business, how we could really even provide more value than we already were. So really an amazing placement. So like I said, we just want to provide some practical tips all along the continuum of employment. So readiness skills. As Laura said, work is not going to be the priority for everybody, and I think even more so, work is not going to be the priority at any given moment. For me, at the school, it's always a question of when is this student ready to pursue employment? When is that student ready to pursue employment? And of course, we're going to take into account preferences and skills, right? We want to know that the person is interested in work. For us, we recently had a 17-year-old student questioning where other students in his class were going every week. This student was in the same class as Zach, so he was wondering, well, Coast Paper, what's that? Why does Zach get to leave school for hours at a time, a couple days a week? And he said, oh, that's a job. Oh, well, I want a job. And this was a huge moment because motivation is not always the student's strength. And he actually just started a volunteer position for the first time based on him showing that interest. And then for us, at the Bay School, our job sampling model is often bringing students out into the community to see our other students working. Because I think it's one thing to go to Trader Joe's, look around Trader Joe's, even look at other people, other workers at Trader Joe's, but when a student can see their peers, the people that they know, working and kind of say, oh, I can do that, I want to do that. My favorite story is taking a student to job sample at a restaurant, and the student he was watching was setting tables. The student who was observing said, watched for 5 minutes and then said, "Can I start?" And so we were pretty sure that he was ready for paid employment. We're definitely looking for sustained engagement, right? You're going to find that employers are really looking for a person to work 3 hours, 4 hours at a time. They want shifts, and that's part of providing value, right? There's a certain quantity element of the job. So at the school, when we're looking for advancing a candidate, we want to make sure that somebody can do 45 minutes of sustained activity, not at their most preferred leisure activity, but something even just mildly preferred. If they can stay with that for 45 minutes, then we know as we negotiate with the employer, we can start with maybe an hour-long shift and look to grow that into what they're really looking for. And effective behavior support. So we're here to talk about folks with intense behavioral needs, and we don't wait. Behaviors aren't going to go away. We know that. We know there's going to be rates of behavior. We just need to make sure that whatever it is, aggression, SIB, bolting, really loud vocal behaviors, they need to have been dropped to a level where it's not going to interfere with the work, right? So again, you're going to hear this word quite a bit, unfortunately, but I can't get off of it. It's value, right? We need to make sure that their rates of behavior are not going to impact the student in a way that they can't provide value to the business. So I frequently check in with each classroom teacher, and I say, hey, how about so-and-so? Are they ready yet? And I'll look at the behavior graphs and we'll talk about it, and really finding that moment that's appropriate for them to enter the workforce. And we. Our final thing is experience required, and that relates to our volunteer program that we're not really going to talk about too much today. Just as an example of that, we have a student currently volunteering with the Homeless Garden Project in Santa Cruz. They have a store, and our student places the labels on their jam jars, and then that jam jar goes directly onto their shelves. So the rate of accuracy required is really high. He's training. When Alan graduates in December from Pacific Cookie Company, this student will move right over to Pacific Cookie Company. So we really try to set that up. We really try to have tracks where people begin in one job or in one volunteer spot, maybe a second volunteer spot, and then move with that same skill set into employment. Job development. So how do you find a job? What are the steps to finding those openings? Because we're not going to look at the want ads and send in a resume, right? So what you need to do is really utilize your connections, utilize your social circle, friends, neighbors, coworkers. Who do they know? What we're looking for is finding that general manager, finding that hiring director, finding that small business owner. Those are the people we need to talk to. Once you've talked to your immediate circle, have them talk to their immediate circles. Some research shows that for any of us finding a job, it's not our immediate circle that's going to help us. It's that second circle of acquaintances that's where the opportunities start to pop up a lot more. So expand your circle, and that will lead you to contacting the decision maker. This was a lesson that I learned the hard way when I started at the vocational coordinator position. If you can't be at a table talking to the decision maker within 2 or 3 meetings, you probably need to move on from that opportunity, because it's not really an opportunity. You need to be able to sit down, talk to that person, talk to the person who will say yes or no, and then one of the values to that is you're going to be able to talk to that person to create the right job. A great example of this with Coast Paper and Supply, where Zach works in the warehouse. I noticed that Coast Paper and Supply was always hiring drivers. Their ad for hiring drivers never came off the job boards. So I contacted the general manager and I said, hey, this is who we are. We're not going to provide you with a driver, but tell me what we could provide to free up other people to be drivers. So I was able to meet with them, find out that inventory was keeping some of his employees in the retail space. So we said, well, hey, how about if we come in, we do inventory, your employees are now drivers, and they can go out in the community. So finding a need and then finding a creative way oftentimes of how you can fill that need, or you can fill a different need and let other employees do something. I think I'm a little infamous at the base school for my habit of going into stores and like running my hand along counters and looking down hallways to see if there's supplies stacked in the hallway, if they're having trouble getting stuff on the shelf, looking through or strolling through the women's department of a clothing store and saying, wow, they need help folding, because people look at stuff and it never gets rehung and never gets refolded. So really searching for needs that, basically that thing that annoys a general manager or small business owner, that might be where they're really happy to see us. So, we talked about length of shift, so I'm just going to bounce on from that. They're going to want more than maybe your individual is ready for, so that's just part of a negotiation process. And just a quick note for transportation. You're doing a lot of work. There's a lot of steps involved. Make sure you don't get to scheduling the first day and then saying, how are they going to get there, though? We never thought of that. We never checked the bus line. We never thought, am I available to bring that person? So just know that accounting for transportation is an important part, too. So job training, you've helped an individual get a job. How are you going to help them to, guess what, provide value? Define the task. For us at the base school, we're probably going to write a task analysis, breaking down the job into as many small steps as we possibly can. The advantage for us in doing that is we're able to assess the individual, find out what they can do independently already. That lets us step back from a lot of the steps of doing a full job and promote that independence. And then we know when we're going to step in with individualized instruction for parts of the job. But we're always going to account for that person being able to do things independently. Utilizing all the tools that could be available. For us, we often have a starting work checklist. That checklist might read, come in, put your jacket and your lunch away, punch in, find your supervisor and get your assignment, get your work materials, go to your station and start working. So that can be a checklist for somebody. We might have be using timers so a person knows when to go on break, or sometimes more importantly, they know when to come back from break, or even to stop work. So that's another way of independence, that we don't have to be giving that prompt when it's time for certain things. And we also, especially since COVID, we use videos sometimes to have that person maybe right before they punch in, they pause outside, they watch a video of themselves doing the job, and then they're able to go in with that fresh in their mind. So the great thing about all of these devices is super self-contained, right? We don't need flip charts and books, timers or anything. We can have notes, we can have videos, we can have timers all on the phone. As long as you explain to the supervisor what the phone is being used for, it's a very natural thing. It's probably a little too natural of a thing to see people on their phones at work, which is why we want to explain why our individual is using it. But it's a great, very natural thing. It doesn't look outside of what other people do, like a flip book might or something. So, targeting soft skills. I know everyone knows all about soft skills. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, okay. So targeting soft skills. I think the most important part of soft skills is establishing relationships early on with people. If you don't establish the relationship in that first week or a week and a half, then it's probably not going to happen. You need to really help your individual learn names, because we all like to hear our names, right? So you want to help that person say hello by name to people. You want to make sure that person is responding to comments. When an owner walks by a PCC and says, hey, you're doing a great job, but keeps walking, that's a tricky social situation. So we help Alan respond quickly enough that the owner can hear him say thank you, at an appropriate voice volume. Okay. Obviously, motivation and reinforcement, just really quick, that's not always going to be a paycheck for people, right? That's not always going to be every 2 weeks I get this piece of paper that's eventually going to convert to money. If you're working at Pacific Cookie Company, it's great because you get a cookie at the end of your shift, and that can be very motivating in itself. Maybe on the way back to school from Pacific Coast and Supplies, where you really don't want a gallon of cleaner, you'll stop at a preferred location on the way. So finding out that daily reinforcement that is frequently different than the paycheck. Maintaining employment is all about relationships. You just have to foster those relationships, and as you step back, or as a coach steps back from teaching, oftentimes those social relationships that you help the individual to build, they can degrade over time, right? They can kind of go away when you're not there helping the person respond. So making sure that they remain in place. And then growth, make sure that you're finding different opportunities, you're expanding. Alan works in packaging, but he has also helped in the cooking department. He loves cross-hatching peanut butter cookies. He actually has made snickerdoodles there, the best snickerdoodles ever because they're covered so thick. So doing things like that. And really briefly, the best time to look for a job is when you have a job, right? So you went through all this process, the person is successfully employed. Go back to step one, notice their growing skills, notice their changing interests, and know that, okay, hey, the pressure's off, they have a job, now I can help look for maybe the next job that they might like, because we all change as we go through life, right? So, Laura, good luck.
All right, I'm going to end our section really quickly, just to be very honest that we're experiencing a really big problem. We've had a lot of successes. Jim was able to share. We've got a lot of practical tips, but the big problem is that a lot of our individuals, too many of our individuals experience job loss after graduation. And really the reality is that existing adult service models are not designed to offer the same level of support as the NPS, and we have to be very honest about that. We're fortunate to have the resources we do, but this doesn't translate exactly to the adult services world. So what are we going to do about that? Possible solutions. That's why we're here, because we're motivated to see this change. We want to see our individuals keep jobs. We want more individuals to access employment and through their adulthood. We really want to recommend that you talk with your service coordinator about blended services, right? Maybe there's not one specific service that offers a customized employment model, but maybe it's supported employment plus tailored day service, which there's a lot of updates with that service model. Maybe it's personal assistance. Maybe it is providing behavioral support, right? So getting all of these different components in place to have a really comprehensive set of supports for the individual. So many times it's not about our individuals learning the specific job task, right? That's one piece of it. But maybe, they need behavioral support too, right? They have challenging behaviors in their repertoire. So having different types of support to be a really, to make sure all of those needs are being met. And as long as they're addressing different goals, then you can combine those services together. Paid internships, talk to your service coordinator about that. I won't talk too much about that. And then, of course, David talked this morning about self-determination, right? So using, same thing, putting all these services together to make sure the individual has, coaching in the job site, help with social skills, behavior support, so on.
So we're going to wrap up. So tailored day service, quickly, I'm not sure if everyone knows what tailored day service is. Hope has a table outside, and they actually have a brochure on tailored day service, so grab their brochure. Tailored day services, the regulations have changed as of July 1 this year, and it opens the windows much wider. Tailored day services allows for one-to-one support for day activities. It's very similar to ILS, whereas ILS is for residential services, tailored day is for day services. Other incentives within the new regulations allow it to be combined in the blended way that was discussed earlier. So, next slide. How is a person requiring greater levels of support going to build skills and meet employer expectations? As families, you want to begin to advocate for customized and supported employment, and those are for the types of jobs that are the employer-based ones that were described here by Jim, those jobs in companies throughout Santa Cruz County. And you can arrange it through tailored day services. And again, consider self-determination as a means of arranging these services. Next slide. So this is the model. This is our curve. With these 3 levels, or 4 types of employment models, we should see an improvement from that 14% of people, only 14% of people working. Next. So remember, there's 2 types of work. There's several types of work, but the 2 types of work I focused in on is those employee-based ones and then those self-employed ones. You need different sets of services for either one. For employee-based models, that's the customized services that were described earlier. So go ahead and hit the slides. So that's the stuff that is happening at base school, and other day services or vocational employment programs are prepared and can offer. For the self-employment types of work, invoice-based jobs, next slide, this is what the staff is going to need to help with. How to discover what the good or service is to be, what's the business plan to get that product built and delivered, how you're going to market it, how you're going to sell it, how you're going to invoice it, how you're going to ship it. All those can be the activity of the person as part of their job, and hopefully the goal would be to build sales and make money through invoicing. Next. So there are a number of people who are doing lots of self-employment, and this is just a list of people I know who are out there in self-employment. Kettle corn sales at farmers markets. I have, through Zoom, I've been meeting people in Southern California. Apparently there's a person doing voiceover in Hollywood as a business. Someone, through their self-determination plan, bought a lathe and is doing woodworking. I would think that DoorDash might be an opportunity if you get the service provider, the person providing support to do the transportation, and then the dropping off the meal at the door could be a means of getting some money for the person. So there are obstacles and barriers. We touched on them a bit. This is where families need to become advocates. Go ahead. This workforce shortage is still problematic. It's impacting a lot. It's an impact on every level. We need to advocate for better wages and better skill building. There are a limited number of tailored day services. So we need to encourage our programs, our vendor providers to begin requesting to become tailored day services. We talked a little bit earlier about the difficulty of transitioning into self-determination. The job carving and customization that Jim was talking about are not services that are easily available at the adult service level. There is work to try to get those to become vendorized services, so advocate that starts happening within your regional centers. Alrighty. I think you guys can read that. So all our folks, regardless of the severity of their disability, have passions. Let's figure ways to make those into profits for them. And the journey is the work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that excellent presentation. Thank you, Laura and Jim, as well, for the wonderful work you're doing at the base school. We have a few minutes left for questions. If you can all just raise hands, I will make sure I'll come by, and we'll start with you right here.
Well, I certainly wish my daughter could be part of a program like that through the public school system, but my question is, what is going to happen to your wonderful group from 22 to 102? Do you have another program in the mix?
Good question.
Great question. We are in the exploratory phase of that, the research phase of that. We have been working with a regional center on possibilities of an enhanced program. And we're hoping, our goal, and we're still a long ways away, but we're just, like the base school, we really feel the need that we need to demonstrate that it can be done and provide a model that can be, as a pilot, right? Show other people that this can be done and this service is needed, and encourage others to create create some new program options too. So, so we're hopeful, and we just staying in close communication with your regional centers about opportunities that might be coming up.
Thanks for that question.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really interesting. I haven't heard anything about the elimination of sub-minimum wage. And I'm wondering how you guys see that affecting the placements you have, the placements going forward. And is there any effort at all, is there any undercurrent of any kind of changes coming to reintroduce sub-minimum wage where it makes sense in terms of the value proposition that Jim was talking about?
Just briefly, more on the non-policy side. When we approach a business, it's always from the standpoint that our employees will be at least minimum wage, and that's why the negotiation process is so important, that we're finding the right jobs, that it is worth it to the business. So even with the minimum wage going up and up and up, we haven't lost any employment as time goes on. So it's just really emphasizes the importance of finding that right fit, right person, right skills.
So it is not coming back. So minimum wage is not going to come back. We can have a conversation about that. But we need to compensate. By removing some minimum wage, what's going to fill the gap for those people? So it's back to the services that we need to enhance, the customized employment and the tailored day services. So the law is a 5-year elimination plan. Hopefully, you're going to start hearing about vendor customized employment services, and we've already seen the elaboration of tailored day services. And then the invoice-based model. You remember, a lot of us have our day jobs and then our gig jobs. So if you have a job that's a few hours a week and at minimum wage, but it isn't going beyond that, and you need time to fill, you can maybe create invoice-based businesses and have them work together in that regard.
Thanks, David.
Aren't there, I have a big mouth, aren't there programs where like companies can hire and they will pay the organization for like 6 months to hire someone? Is that part of Voc Rehab? I can't remember what it's called.
The Regional Center has a paid internship program.
Okay.
And it's a certain number of hours, and I think a certain number of dollars. And the hope is, and it's paid for by the Regional Center entirely.
Yeah.
And the hope is the person then can be hired on permanently. So that's available. And then there are minor employment incentives to the employers, which would be a tax credit. But truly, the paid internship program is something we, again, advocate for it. I want my kid to be receiving the paid internship.
Thank you.
Just 2 comments. Your presentation was great. However, in all the examples that you showed, the individual was not in need of a one-on-one aid or assistant. And there are some individuals that can be employed, but they need somebody with them to direct them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, I just want to quickly comment that all of the students that you saw have one-to-one support.
Okay,
And
it
they
wasn't
are.
shown.
Yep, and
That's
they
great
are.
to know.
One of them, maybe in the photos, there was somebody slightly present, but the goal is about building independence. That you don't need that person over time, right?
Right.
So the examples you saw where these students had built a level of independence.
Well, that's
where
good
that
to know.
person has faced it.
The second comment I want to make is just a general comment, and it applies to the San Francisco Bay Area, not necessarily to Santa Cruz. And that is the reality of the agencies that are providing competitive integrated employment services. The only people, the reason that percentage is at 14% is the only people that are being served in competitive integrated employment in the here and now are persons with very minimal level of need.
That's the point.
And the people with greater level of need are simply not being served. And the regional centers, at least in the Bay Area, are not demanding that these people be served. And the State Department of Rehab also is responsible for not taking on these individuals with greater level of need. It's a big, big problem, because it can be policy from now the cows come home, but it's not happening.
Totally agree. I can yell. Totally agree. You're absolutely right. The way the regulations are in place now only serves that 14% that I mentioned. We need to expand services. We need to enhance through customized employment. But the tailored day services can be a game changer because it is one-to-one services available to adults, not just in school settings. Problem is, we got to get a workforce so that programs can begin finding the staff to arrange one-to-one, right? If you have 10 staff and 30 people, that's going to be a 1-to-3 ratio. So they'll need 30 staff in that regard if they're going to
But
have
there
all
are
of them.
individuals that already have one-on-ones in their daily life who
Yes.
could then go with them to be in a job, and the clients, the individuals, are absolutely capable of doing jobs. And the ones that already have one-on-ones, apart from the
Well,
tailored
that's a
day,
skill. So that would be
are not being provided with opportunities by the agencies, again, in the San Francisco Bay Area.
completely agree with that, and that's a need to have our workforce be trained in vocational rehab so that they know how to work and help a person with customized employment or with an invoice-based job. It's the day programs are not providing the training, and that's a skill that needs to be built among our direct service providers. That's a thing to advocate for.